You're listening to the 2018 Nelson Arts Festival Page and Blackmore Readers and Writers Program. This session features James Russell in conversation with Joe Dippie. Good morning. Hello. Who's here to see some dragons this morning? Yay! My name's Kerry and I'm the coordinator of Readers and Writers. I want to say thank you to our sponsor Page and Blackmore. And Joe Dippie from Page and Blackmore is on stage and she's going to be chatting to James Russell this morning. So I'll just hand over to Joe. There will be some time for questions from readers at the end. So keep your questions in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Welcome, James. And welcome everybody. Wonderful to see so many young readers out there today. James has published 6 books in the Dragon Brothers series. There are the 3 picture books, which you'll see displayed over there, and the 3 chapter books. Has anyone read at least 4 of the books? Hands up. Anyone read 4 of the books? Has anyone read 5 of the books? Has anyone read all 6 of the books? Oh, well done. Good work. James lives in Auckland with his family. He has 2 boys named Flynn and Paddy. Can anyone name the boys that are in the books? Yell it out loud. Yeah, well done. And James, you had a really interesting path getting the books published.
I did. Yes, I did.
How can you tell us a bit about how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So the 3 picture books were the first books that I published, and they were in 2012, 2013, and 2014. And I wrote those books on the train going to and from work. I used to be an editor at the New Zealand Herald. And every day I would write on the train, I would write a part of the book, and then as I was coming home on the train, I'd write a little bit more, and every day my wife and my children would pick me up from the train station, and I would have to have something written for them, or else there would be trouble. They'd go, "Dad, what's going on? What are you written?" So I had to write something every day, and so that's how the 3 picture books came around. And then they were published, and they did really well. And so at the same time, any of the kids out there that are thinking about being authors, there's a trick to it. You don't make a whole lot of money for quite a long time until your books do well. So I had 3 books out and they were doing really well, but not enough to live on, I have to say. But what happened is I was at work one day and my boss came up to me and he said, "James, have you got a second?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Come into my office." I came into his office. He said, "I've got bad news." And I said, "Well, here we go." And he said, "You're losing your job." And I was an editor at the Herald, as I said, so that was my main source of money. And I just bought a house. I had 2 kids, Flynn and Paddy. They go to swimming lessons, they go to soccer. It's a hassle. When you get old, money's just a pain. Ask your parents. Anyway, so he said, "You're losing your job." And I went, "Oh dear, what am I going to do now?" I knew I didn't have enough money coming in from the books to pay the mortgage, pay for the swimming lessons, all of that stuff. But the cool thing is that when you have a job and you get told that you're going to lose it, I've been there for 10 years, the company have to pay you some money. So this is called redundancy money or severance pay, right? And the company gave me $30,000. Sounds like a lot of money, right? But in fact, you ask your parents how long that would last your family. It's not that much. So what I did is I took some of that money and I paid for a plane ticket to Italy, which doesn't sound like a very sort of responsible use of the money when you've just lost your job. But the reason I did it was to go to the Bologna Children's Book Fair, which is the biggest children's book fair in the world. And it's an amazing place. And there are thousands of publishers and authors and illustrators, and it's really, really interesting. But I did it. I filled a backpack full of my books, of these picture books, and the idea was to go to different publishers and try and find an overseas publisher for these books. And I had been walking around for 3 days, and I was really tired, and I was fed up, and I hadn't had any luck. I'd had a few meetings, but nothing really looked like it was going to come off. And then on the last day, I saw this beautiful looking, comfortable couch in a stand, and I said, I'm going over there, just purely because my feet were sore. And I went and sat down on this couch, and I was thinking, oh, this is lovely. And this lady came out from the back of the stand, and she said, hey, how you doing? She's American. And I said, yeah, not too bad. She was obviously tired as well. She sat down beside me. We just started chatting. And she said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm trying to get these books published. I'm from New Zealand. You know, they're doing pretty well there. I want to get them published around the world. She said, show me. So I pulled them out, and I showed her the books. And that was, she looked at them for about 20 seconds. Just flick, 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 flick. And she said, I'll publish those books. I didn't even know she was a publisher. She happened to be the head honcho of this big publishing company. And so she published the books. But the cool thing about that was that she gave me $30,000 as well to publish the book. So now I had $30,000 from my old job. I had $30,000 from her, minus the money that I spent on the plane ticket and the accommodation in Italy. And I thought, here's my chance. I went home and I got to work and I started writing these books. So these ones, actually, if we click on that one, the ones down the bottom there, I started writing the one on the left-hand side there, the Dragon Defenders one. And so I furiously worked on that. And that one went to #1 for a little while in New Zealand. So for a New Zealand author, that is. And so I was on my way. I thought, I can make enough money, I can keep writing. If my books are good enough and they sell well enough, I can be a writer, a professional full-time writer, which is what I am, seems like some kind of miracle to me. So actually losing my job was one of the best things that happened. But it's not all fun and games being a writer, because I was telling Joe earlier that I was going to tell you guys the story, and it's a little bit gory. And I'm not sure if you can handle it. You guys, can you handle that? I might stand up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then I'll stand down here so I won't get in the way of this thing, because I have to show you the actions. So, as Joe mentioned, I have two boys, Flynn and Paddy. Now, if I go on one, so that's Flynn and Paddy. So Flynn is the one at the back, Paddy is the one at the small one in the front, on the left. Now, do you guys at your school, do you have book week? You have a book week? Maybe it's a North Island thing, I don't know, but, oh, you do? So my kids at their school have a book week, and at the very last day of book week, they can dress up as their favourite character from a book, and it's a great day. But Flynn thought it would be cool if he went dressed as himself, my son Flynn. So he went dressed as himself, and he got his mum to make him the shirt, stitch it all up, he got a belt. We had this cool slingshot that we'd made a few years earlier. So he had that, he had these old shorts, he looked really cool. But the one thing he didn't have was a pouch. So those of you that have read the book will know that he has a pouch that he keeps his stones in for his slingshot. And he didn't have one of those. And he came to me and he said, Dad, have you got anything that I can use to put on my belt to complete my outfit? And I had to think for a while. And I remembered that my best friend, Marcus Berry, when I got married, he gave me as a wedding present a great big hunting knife. And I don't know if you guys know anything about wedding present gift etiquette, but you don't give hunting knives for wedding presents. You give toasters, you give a nice fruit bowl, a nice set of sheets maybe, something useful for the house. But no, he gave me a hunting knife. And my wife went, what sort of a wedding present is that? And I was like, yeah, Marcus, what sort of a wedding present is that? But it's secretly inside, I was thinking, that's quite cool. It's quite a cool knife. But anyway, but it came with this leather pouch, and the pouch connects to your belt. And so I said to Flynn, you can take the pouch. I'm not going to give him the knife. Somebody at school will get murdered. But I gave him the pouch, and he took it to school, and he went off and had a great day. And then 2 days later, I was sitting writing my second novel, and I was about 3/4 of the way through that. And when I write furiously. I'm in the zone, and I write really quickly, and I barely break. So I got up. I realised I was starving. I got up, had some lunch, made myself a quick sandwich. As I was eating my sandwich, I looked up on top of the fridge, and on top of the fridge, I had left the knife to keep it out of harm's way. but the case was nowhere to be seen. And I thought to myself, where's Flynn put the case? And so I took the knife down, I put it on the kitchen bench to remind myself when Flynn came home from school to ask him where he put the case so I could put it away, keep everyone safe. But instead what happened was at about 3 o'clock that afternoon, my wife gave me a call and she said, we're on our way home. Can you put some crumpets in the toaster for the boys? They're starving. And I said, no problem. And so I hung up, I got the crumpet. I don't know why we did this. We keep the crumpets in the freezer. Believe me, we don't do it anymore. So I pulled the crumpets out of the freezer and I was like, and I was trying to pull them apart, but they were frozen, stuck together. And as I was trying to pull them apart, the thought went through my head, if only I had an implement with which I could separate these frozen crumpets. And as that thought went through my head, what did I see? The knife. So I picked it up. I said, this is just the thing. I picked it up and I held it the way you do when you want to separate frozen crumpets, like a dagger. And then you take the frozen crumpets, you hold them in your left hand, and you put the tip down in between them like that, and you give it a little bit of pressure. Nothing happened. I thought, I'm going to have to push a little bit harder. Everything's going to be fine. I pushed a little bit harder. Nothing. I was like, just a little bit harder. Everything will be fine. And the crumpets just went, fell apart so easily, and the knife went whoom, straight into my hand. And I hope you guys can handle this. The blood went, it's actually sprayed out of my hand, and it went whoosh across the wall. And I was like, I was staggering around. Luckily, the spurting stopped quite quickly, but it was pouring on the floor. I was slipping around in it. I got a tea towel, instantly soaked with blood. I threw it on the ground. I got another one. And I was freaking out. And then it was at that moment that Flynn and Patty and their mother came home, my wife. They were like, hi, Dad. And they were like, and I was standing there going, and Patty, there's something weird with Patty. He seems to love it when I hurt myself because he was like, looking at the blood, he was really pleased. In fact, a few years ago, when Patty was really small, maybe 6, I was chasing him down the deck. I was like, come on, you little, we were having a laugh, and I was chasing him down the deck, and my foot went straight through the deck, and I went in up to my knee, and I cut my knee open terribly. And I was lying there on the deck, and I was about to go skiing 4 days later. I'd had this amazing opportunity to go to Whistler skiing in Canada as a writing job, and I was like so excited about it. And I looked down and I saw that my knee was so badly cut open, and I was like, I said a word I shouldn't have said. I said a word, started with S, ended with T, 4 letters. It reverberated across the neighbourhood. And Paddy was so pleased, he just went, that I'd said this word. And he ran into his mum and he goes, Dad just said the F word. But anyway, so I was going into shock. Do you kids know what shock is? For those that don't know what shock is, it's your body's kind of response to a trauma. So you feel like you're going to be sick, you think you're going to throw up, you think you're going to faint. Terrible. So they put me in the car, took me to hospital, and they, when they got home from hospital, those crumpets were perfectly thawed out on the bench. There wasn't a drop of blood on them. They had them. They ate them when they got home. But so I was in terrible, terrible state. And I think I've actually got a picture of the knife. Do you guys want to see it? Yeah. Are you okay with that, parents? Yeah. It's pretty gruesome. You sure you want to see it, kids? What's the matter with you kids? What do you want to see something like that for? Okay, let's have a look. I know this is unorthodox, but let's do it. Oh, no, that's not the knife. I wonder if I've got the wrong pictures. Do you guys mind if we go through like my childhood photos instead? That's my mum and me 20 years ago, about that. Oh, I've definitely got the wrong pictures. That's my evil nemesis sister, Sarah. The most evil sister in all the world. There we go. That's at Lake Taupo. We had this, actually that's kind of a funny story as well. See that engine on the back of the boat? That engine was old. Even then it was old. And Dad used to love that engine and cared for it like a child, like a baby. I think he loved it more than he loved us. I'm sure one day I walked into the shed and he had his cheek on it like that, but he used to oil it, keep it out of the rain, and make sure it was just perfectly looked after. And he looked after it so well that when it finally died, I was about 12 years old, and it was the oldest outboard motor on the whole beach. And then he went and bought a new one, and he loved that one even more. And the new one, but the thing was, he made a mistake. I was 12 and I was strong enough to carry it down to the boat, and he said, "James, let's go fishing. You get the engine, put it on the boat." And I got it. And I took it down, I put it on the boat, and then we got about that far off the shore, and Dad was like, "Okay, here we go, brand new engine." And he gave it that. And I heard this, and I turned around, and it had fallen off, and it was still going. It was going, and Dad was peering over the edge of the boat, going, watching his brand new engine sink to the bottom of the lake. I'd forgotten to do it up. I never knew you had to do engines up. I just put it on the thing and went inside to the toilet or got a sandwich or something. So, oh yeah, that's us practicing to be doctors. Okay, where are we? That's not the knife. That's not the knife. That's the knife. Can you still see the blood on it? I'm only joking, that's not blood, that's just a bit of rust. Now, I do have a picture of the wound. Do you want to see that? Okay. For those that don't want to see it, or parents that don't want their children to see it, I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to count down from 3. I'm going to put it on for 5 seconds, which I'll count out, and then you can open your eyes again after that. Ready? 3, 2, 1. It's gruesome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's what I looked like when I came home from the hospital. But you'll see that the wound had like this zigzag. Well, that was because the surgeon had to cut it all open to repair the nerve, because it cut through a nerve. But the coolest thing about it is now I've got this quite cool Harry Potter scar on my hand. So that was the one good thing that came out of it. But that's what I looked like when I came home. And it was terrible because I had to I had to type. Like I say, when I write really fast. I can type like 90 words a minute. I can just fly through it. I can type almost faster than I can think, and it's really great when you're on a roll. But of course, when I came, and my memory's terrible, so I think so far ahead, I'm trying to do it with one hand, and then I forgot what I've thought of, and it's terrible. So, and then somebody said to me, "Why don't you use voice recognition software?" And I don't know if you know what that is, but you just speak to your computer, and it writes what you've just said on the screen. And I thought, cool, I'll finish my novel that way. But there were two types. There's one apparently that's $500. Apparently it's amazing. There's another one that is free. It's a free online one, and I was like, that's the one for me, because I'm quite cheap and I didn't have much money. But so I got the free one, but it was so bad it couldn't understand what I said. It would be I'd say Flynn and Patty ran into the forest and hid behind a rock. And it would write, Mark went to the cafe and got himself a nice cup of coffee and a hot buttered scone. It was pointless. It was useless. So I did have to finish it one-handed, that novel, but we got there in the end. What's next there? Oh yeah. So this is for those that haven't seen the picture books. I know some of you guys might have just come straight to the. Has anyone put up your hand if you've seen those picture books? You obviously have. You've read all 6. So some haven't. So these books came before the novels, and these are the same characters, and they're all rhyming text. Beside an ancient forest, before you reach the sea, you'll find a tiny cottage and a happy family. 2 brothers, Flynn and Paddy, their parents, Mum and Dad, a lovely dog named Coco, their chocolate-coloured lab. One day when it was raining, the boys were stuck inside. Paddy thought he'd tried to take poor Coco for a ride. The dog, she leapt and bucked him off, then tore around the room. Their mother chased her from the house, brandishing her broom. The boys peered out the window at Coco's sad wee face, when a sudden swooping dragon left nothing in her place. So that's what happens at the very start. The boy's dog gets stolen. So they make a plan to rescue the dog, make some terrible sandwiches, and set off and search. And they hear this roar and a woof at the top of the mountain. Sneak up there, they see the tail poking out. Paddy stays outside, Flynn goes in. Flynn, when the dog sees Flynn, starts barking, wakes up the dragon. Meanwhile, Paddy outside has found some rope in his bag. And when the dragon wakes up, it starts to chase them. The chasing dragon came so close it thought I've nearly got him. Paddy could feel its fiery breath warming up his bottom. As the dragon lunged to bite poor Paddy's derriere, you know what a derriere is, right? Anyone want a clue? Over here, you want a clue? Are you getting it? In which country does the word derriere mean bottom? I was asking the children, actually. So in France, they have their own word for bottom in France. It's pretty weird. Anyway, so yes, the dragon misses them, takes a mouthful of fresh air. Paddy's tied the dragon to a tree outside. They get home. Actually, it was kind of funny because I asked Link Choi, who was the illustrator of these books, to draw Paddy half in and half out of his bed. Because I don't know if you've seen how weirdly children sleep. I never knew this until I had my own children. But I would go to give Paddy a kiss goodnight, and often he'd be sound asleep like this. And I didn't get Link to draw him doing that, but I had him sort of wobbling half in and half out of the bed. But so that was book one. Book two, they're sitting at home, bored out of their minds. The only cure for boredom, as all smart children know, is, of course, to go somewhere you're not allowed to go. So they go up to the attic, and in the attic they discover this map. Whoops. And they see at the top the dragon hatchery and the Mother's Knee Hill, and they say, we've got to check that out. So off they go, they make some more terrible sandwiches, set off. They pause to have a picnic on the ridge of rising flame. There isn't any smoke, said Flynn. It's really quite a shame. A sudden flame rose skyward and burned his sandwich bread. Now you have a toasty, his little brother said. And so they get up there. Paddy sits on, they can't see a dragon or a dragon's egg anywhere. Paddy sits on what he thinks is a dragon's egg, is a rock, and lets go. And, well, actually, it's a silent one. Silent but violent. But it cracks open, the vibration cracks open the egg. The dragon hatches, starts chasing them down the hill, and all the other dragons on the hillside start hatching and chasing them. But they can't get away from this green one. He follows them home, becomes their pet. And that's the end of book two. Book three, the dragon has grown up. He's now the size of a horse. They're still trying to keep him a secret from their mum and dad. One day, they've given him a name, Elton John. Only ancient people will know who Elton John is. He's this old singer. He's so old he's nearly dead. But so they've called him Elton John, and Elton, for some reason, picks up the two boys and the dog and flies off, and they don't know where he's going. They don't know where he's taken them. He doesn't know where he's going. He's following some ancient kind of migratory urge. But he's going to, any of you kids know what bird that is? Falcon, yes, very good, yes. So there's fewer of those in New Zealand than there are kiwi. They're beautiful things. Anyway, you'll see why in a minute. So Elton brings them to Mount Astonishing. And Mount Astonishing is where the dragons gather each year on the island. And of course, when the other dragons see two boys and a dog, they're like, what are they doing here? They start to chase them. Elton picks up the kids, off he flies. The other dragons chase them. Elton flies into this cloud. The other dragons go in, can't see where they're going, crash into each other, fall out of the sky. And that is the end of this book until later after supper, as the brothers went to bed, their dragon leapt upon the sill and cocked his lovely head. A dragon's tear rolled down his cheek, and with a mighty roar, he flew into the starry night, gone forevermore. Their mother burst into the room, said she, I heard a noise. Now quiet down, my special brave and noble dragon boys. So that's the end of the trilogy. That's how it ends. The dragon just leaves. It's heartbreaking. And in fact, I thought it was quite sort of poignant, but some kids, I was reading to this group of kids at a school, and there was a girl in the front row. She would have been about 5, 6 maybe, and she was loving it. She was listening to she was, every time I turned the page, what's going to happen next? And when I got to that, I saw her face go, oh. I wasn't looking at her, I could see something was going on. And then she stood up in front of all her class, all her school, and her teachers, and she went, that ending sucks. And I went, oh. The teachers went, oh. And and it was kind of a shock, you know. And in fact, my American publisher, it is a bit full on. Like, there's not even a question mark at the end of Gone Forevermore. It's just Gone Forevermore. Get over it, kids. The dream is over. No more dragons. And my American publisher actually asked me to change that ending. They didn't think the American kids could handle it. But the Kiwi kids have done all right with it, I have to say. But anyway, I went home that night, and I was having a shower, I remember. And I was, so actually this was after I had, this was after I had come back from Bologna. Actually, it was, just after I'd come back from Bologna, I visited the school. And then I was having a shower that night, and I was, what I need to do is get a waterproof pad for the shower, because I always have these great ideas in the shower, and I urge, if you have any big decisions to make, take a shower. There's something calming about it. You can think clearly. But anyway, I need to get a waterproof pad, because instead I throw the door open, I run across the lounge in the nude, and then I write down my ideas. My wife's going, "What are you doing? You're dripping everywhere." But my idea was to write The Dragon Defenders. Set 3 years later, they haven't seen a dragon in all that time. They don't know where Elton has gone, but you can see there in the background that he returns. So, yeah, it was my career plan, but it was also, it just kind of, as soon as I had the idea, I knew it was the right one. I thought, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write about it. So, should we do a?
How come it's dragons? Because I mean, Jack has a beanstalk. Narnia has a wardrobe. So how come the boys have dragons?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, my boys loved dragons when they were little. They really, really loved them. So I think that's how it started. They used to ask me to, not just yet, we'll do it in a minute. I think they used to ask me to make up stories about them before I started writing them on the train. So I would make up stories about dragons night after night, and then I thought, right, I need to do this, write them down. And so it was only actually when I started writing them down that the kids really liked them, and then they asked me to read them to their friends, and their friends really liked them. And it was then that I thought, oh, maybe these could be a book. So it was then that I found Link Choi, who was the illustrator, and he had just finished work as a props designer on The Hobbit. So the timing was perfect. He was looking for something to do. Yeah.
Well, one of the most amazing things, there's lots of amazing things about your books, but one of the most amazing is augmented reality.
Yes.
Which, until you told me about it, I'd never heard even the term.
Yeah.
And you were one of the first in New Zealand to do it.
I think I was the first.
One of the first in the world to do it.
Oh, yes. We may as well set up there, Kerry. Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. I had a friend come and stay with me, and he had a business card, and he would put it on the table, and he'd hold his phone over it, and there would be this wobbly thing that sat above it when he on the screen of his phone, and I'd never seen anything like it. And he left, and it was only about a week later, probably having another shower, I thought, oh, I could do that. I could add that to my books.
But I've seen it added to other books, but not as well as yours. Yours just
that's nice to
looks
know. Thanks.
So amazing.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. So, well, it was interesting. So when I went to Bologna, it was set up, and I thought I was the first in the world to do it. I really did. I thought no one would have done this. And it was kind of stupid. I didn't even Google it to find out. But I realised when I got there that a few people had been doing it. So picture books, there's a bit of augmented reality around. Maybe for those that haven't seen it, I'll demonstrate so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Have you all tried the augmented reality at home? You know what it is, though? Right.
So the app just uses a camera. And then when you point it at this map in these picture boxes...
Do you want me to hold the box?
Oh, it's all right. No, I can do it. It turns into a kind of a 3D world. Oh. So Yeah, it's a clever technology, and the further you get away from it, the kind of smaller it gets, and then closer you get, the bigger it gets, and the louder it gets as well. And over here is the waterfall. But what really tickles me is that these are published all around the world. You know, they're in China and all different places, and all of those children are listening to the sound of the tui in the forest. So that's what I really like. But it's also it was the first, as far as I could see, it was one of the first 2 or 3 novels in the world to actually have it. So that was really interesting. I thought, oh, it's probably in a bunch, but I started Googling and I couldn't find any. And in fact, there's another one just been launched. A crew on Waiheke Island have launched another one. So it's coming in quite quickly. But I didn't even put augmented reality on the cover. This one has it, but in the old ones, I thought no one even knows what augmented reality is. I didn't know what it is. But so here's, in these novels, there's 4 or 5 pages that you can use it. And so this one is the bad guy's ship. So, and you can sneak inside. Oh. So you can look in, you can see the engine room, there's the chickens, there's the goats, that's the dragon's food. So yeah, it's pretty clever stuff. But actually, let's just have a little show of hands. Who has read any of the novels? And is there some people out there that haven't? Put up your hand if you haven't. Okay, so maybe I'll tell you guys a little bit, the people that have, just bear with me, I'll tell them a little bit about who these boys have become. I'll read you a little excerpt of who Flynn and Paddy are now that they're a bit older. So Flynn, well, you'll get it. So as you'll have realised by now, Flynn and Paddy were born adventurers. Aged just 10 and 12 years old, you'd probably have to search the entire world to find 2 children better able to survive in the wilderness. They'd been shaped by the place in which they lived, an island in the middle of the ocean, more than 500 miles from the mainland. It wasn't a big island, but it wasn't small either. If you set off to walk right around it, you'd need enough food to last for 3 days. There wasn't another family or child on the island. There wasn't a single shop, a post office, or a service station. Even if there had been a service station, there wasn't a single car to fill with petrol, nor any roads on which to drive. There was, of course, no public library, although their mum and dad had a huge bookcase full of books and had taught them to read as well as any child from the city. Almost nothing in their home was made of plastic, but wood, flax, paper, cotton, canvas, wool, iron, or stone. They knew what electricity was only because their parents had explained it to them. At home, they used candles to read by and a wood stove to cook dinner. They even had to make their own toys using flax, some wood, or perhaps a few seashells harvested from the beach. Never in their lives had these island children seen a television, a computer, or even a phone. They'd never seen a skateboard, scooter, or bicycle either. They hadn't once played a game of football, tennis, or cricket. But Flynn and Paddy could run as fast, climb as high, throw as far, and swim as well as any adult. In fact, it's likely they were better. They were so fit they could climb a mountain without breaking for lunch. They could swim half a mile out to sea and back again without stopping. They could dive beneath the water to at least 20 feet and hold their breath for 2 minutes while they harvested shellfish or chased a lobster deep into the seaweed. On land, they could run like the wind or gallop bareback on Clappers, their lovely horse, using only their knees to steer her. It was useful being able to ride no hands, so they could shoot a bow and arrow or fire a slingshot at a moving target with deadly accuracy. Their parents didn't find it strange at all that their young sons would return home after dark, often with a deer or wild pig slung over Clapper's rump. Sometimes they arrived on the doorstep dripping wet with a woven flax bag full of fish, squid, or octopus for dinner that evening. Of course, the brothers didn't start off this way. They were born as tiny and helpless as any other child in the world. But they weren't kept wrapped in cotton wool like many children these days. They were allowed to explore the natural world, and as little children they got hurt a lot. There may never before have been 2 children with so many bumps and scrapes, cuts and bruises. Their poor mother's nerves must have been in tatters. So I'll just skip a little bit. Along with Clappers and a faithful Labrador named Coco, the boys also had one other rather unusual pet, a young male falcon named Lightning. They decided on his name after seeing how incredibly fast he could fly. So the falcon that I showed you in The Dragon Riders, the 3rd picture book, I had no idea, obviously, that I was going to write these when I when that book was made. And Link just drew that picture of the falcon, and he just thought it was a good idea. He thought it was a nice image, and the dragons down in the background. So it was only when I started writing this I thought, oh, maybe they could have another pet or another two pets. And I remembered the falcon, and I thought that would be a great pet. I would love to. I've always kind of dreamed it would be a lovely pet to have. So that's kind of how that came about. But in this book, there is a bad guy. And the bad guy's name is the Pitbull. And the Pitbull lives on the mainland, 500 miles away. And the Pitbull has a pilot that works for him. And his pilot is flying over the island one day, sees a dragon, goes straight back to his boss and says, dragons exist in the world and they live on this island in the middle of the ocean. The Pitbull says, I want one. He says, I want a dead dragon and I want a dragon's egg, because he's got his own private zoo full of deadly and dangerous creatures, and he wants to hatch it in his own private zoo, charge people squillions of dollars to come and see it. So he sends his 3 best men to the island to carry out his orders. Now the boys are out hunting one day, and they come to the edge of the forest. The other thing I meant to say about the island is that it's surrounded by this razor-sharp coral reef, and there's only 2 ways of getting in there. Actually, I should say about the island, it's kind of a mixture. In my mind, it's a mixture, it's sort of this utopian paradise, beautiful island. And it's a mixture of Great Barrier Island, which I love to visit, paradise up there, and like tropical islands like Fiji or Tonga or some of those places that have got those coral reefs around them. But there are only 2 ways to get to this island, and both of them are really treacherous and dangerous. They're squiggly paths through the coral that it's really difficult, and only the granny figured out how to do it. Years before, they were shipwrecked on the island, and that's how they came to be there. But all that story is told in the books. So they get down, they're hunting, and they get to the edge of the forest. They look down, and they see that there's this black boat anchored in the bay, and it's already come in through this twisty path. And they're freaking out because they've never seen anybody on their island before. So they creep down to the water's edge. They break off some short, hollow reeds and use them like a snorkel, and they swim out to this black boat. They get up inside it, and they're looking around at all the stuff they've never seen before in their lives. They find a wallet with money in it. They have no idea what it is. They never had to use money. There's a can of Coke with a straw coming out of it. They're like, what is that? Packet of biscuits. Nothing they've ever eaten's come wrapped in plastic, right? So all this stuff's freaking them out. And they find phones. They find a phone just like a normal phone. Computers, printers, all the stuff. They have no idea what it is. But they see also on the wall of the boat, they see that there is a bunch of photos of their island, and in a few of those photos they can see their family. So they know they're in danger. And it's then that they hear a shout and a splash, and the men are coming back to the boat in their dinghy. So they have to, at this point, it's too late to dive off because the men are going to see them. So they're waiting in the cockpit, and they realise there's a little hatch up the front that they can jump up through. So they wait until the men are actually on the boat, and just before they arrive, Flynn has this brainwave, and he runs back out into the main cabin, steals the phone, and he steals these bits of paper, which are the instructions from the Pitbull to his men to get him a dragon's egg and kill a dragon. And then they shoot out through the hatch and escape. But just prior to that, Paddy had picked up the phone, and as any child would, he was tutuing around with it, and he saw, all the bright colours of the apps, and he opened one of them, and it happened to be the app that we use, and he held it over a coded page of writing, and it revealed the code, and it revealed the Pitbull's orders to his men to find him a dragon's egg and to kill a dragon. Sorry, I'm trying to find this page where I can show you. Where is it? Must be up here. Forgive me, I should have put a book. Oh, maybe I do have a bookmark in here, actually. So they sneak off anyway, and they've stolen the phone. There it is. They've stolen the phone, and they've stolen the papers, and the papers look a little bit like this. They don't actually have anything on them other than a picture, and this is where you can use the app in the books. You hold the iPad or the phone over this page, and something will happen, and I'll demonstrate that for you. We're still going here, aren't we? Yep. So this is the Pitbull. This is the bad guy. And you can see when I put it over the page, the little play symbol comes up. Now, I must warn you, he's not very nice, but he is devastatingly handsome. Open the volumes up. Yep, I can hear that.
I get what I want. I think you understand this now. If I want an antelope for my lunch, I get an antelope for my lunch. You know what I want right now? I want a dead dragon. And I want the egg of a dragon in my possession. If you fail to bring me what I want, I will crush you like insects. I will break your bones. Oh, and if that stupid little family tries to get in your way or stop you, I think you know what to do. Don't fail me. Don't fail me.
Told you he was handsome. So that's the pit bull. So yeah, there's 4 or 5 bits of content in each book that you can use your app, and a lot of them aren't that fancy whiz-bang 3D images. Some of them are videos like that with some wonderful acting. Actually, you know the bit where it goes, "I will break your bones." So I'll let you in a secret. That's actually me. I needed someone reliable, ugly, cheap, and so I thought I'll use myself. But when I said, "I will break your bones," and I got the, it wasn't antelope, by the way, it was a leg of lamb, and I went like that, and it just went, it didn't make any noise, or not a satisfying noise anyway. So I had Flynn off to the side with a stick of celery, and I said, "I'll break your bones," and he went with the celery, it made this beautiful noise. So yeah, it's a lot of fun doing them. It takes a while to set up the house, and there's one where the pit bull's in a ship. That's in the next one. Have we got time to do another reading? What time do we finish, or should we go to questions? Okay, so I've probably got a 5-minute reading. If that would that work?
Yeah.
Want to hear some? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is the part where Flynn and Paddy are finally reunited with Elton after over 4 years. The boys climbed for more than an hour to reach the other side of the valley. They scrambled across frozen waterfalls and fought their way through deep snow, all the time trying to stay out of sight to the dragons wheeling in the sky above them. Now they had reached the monstrous cliff where they had spotted their pet dragon. They inched their way along a thin ledge that cut across the face of the cliff. Frozen and exhausted, the boys' legs and arms shook with the effort. Their trail ran right up against the cliff, and they could no longer see Elton. For all they knew, he may have already taken to the sky and be miles away by now. They could see the helicopters no more than 4 or 5 miles distant. They flew backwards and forwards across the island, coming closer and closer. Paddy led, Flynn followed. The boys clung to any handhold they could find on the cliff face. Most of them weren't handholds at all, more like tiny lumps or cracks in the smooth rock. It was incredibly dangerous. One slip and the brothers would fall 1,000 feet to their deaths. Finally, as they neared the end of the ledge, the rock platform where they had seen Elton was slowly revealed. As they shuffled the last few feet, they saw the tip of a long, graceful tail. It was the colour of a polished emerald. Elton's tail. He was still there. The boys hurried, anxious to see their dragon again. For Paddy in particular, it had been over 4 years since he'd last seen him. Glad to be off the tiny ledge, the boys walked onto the rock platform to finally stand in front of their old friend. The sight of him took their breath away. Elton had grown into a truly enormous animal. His bright green scales seemed to glow against the vivid orange of his colossal wings, which were gracefully folded to the sides of his body. His noble head was long and streamlined, with clusters of spines raking backwards over his powerful neck. Puffs of white smoke billowed from his nostrils. The boys heard a deep, low rumble. Their dragon was sound asleep and snoring heavily. This, of course, made the brothers giggle. When Elton was just a baby, he used to keep them awake with his snoring. It seemed that little had changed. As the boys stood in wonder at their beautiful dragon, they became aware of another presence. Something was moving behind Elton. They heard the sound of rocks clunking together and the unmistakable throaty snort of a large animal. Alarmed, the brothers looked at each other. "What is it?" Paddy hissed. Flynn shrugged his shoulders and put his finger to his lips. He motioned for Paddy to get down, but there was nowhere to hide. As the boys stood, transfixed, another dragon slowly appeared from behind Elton. It was obviously a female with a finer, more slender head. She was huge. She had cobalt blue skin and luminous yellow wings. She craned her neck to the sky, turning her head away from the boys towards the sun. Her eyes were closed against the glare. She looked to be enjoying a good stretch after waking from a deep sleep. Then she spread her wings out as wide as they could go. They were so large the boys suddenly felt as though they were inside a cavernous tent. The sun lit up the thin, translucent skin covering her wings and bathed the rock platform in a butter-coloured, glowing light. Flynn and Paddy were stuck to the ground with fear. They did the only thing they could think of, reach for their weapons. Paddy notched an arrow to the string of his bow as Flynn felt for a stone for his slingshot, but he fumbled and the stone fell from the pouch, landing with a soft clunk on the ground. Kerry, can we put it back onto that presentation? Thanks. The relaxed and cat-like movements of the female dragon changed in an instant. She tensed and her muscles bulged. The spines on her neck sprung out like the hackles rising on a dog. Her huge head swiveled. Her deep green eyes flicked open and fixed upon the boys. In one swift and powerful movement, she stepped across Elton and let forth a screaming roar, so powerful that the boys staggered backwards towards the cliff edge. So that's a little excerpt from book 2. And I realised I haven't mentioned Briar, and I know you had a question about Briar.
Yes, because the pit bull has a niece, Briar. Yes. Now, the boys are named after real people. Is Briar named after a real person?
Briar is named after an old family friend of ours. Briar is now 21, actually, and studying at university in Wellington. But when I met her, she was 6 years old, and she was basically born in the bush just north of Auckland. And she could tell you the name of every native plant on a bushwalk when she was 6 years old. So she was this really amazing kind of bush girl, super athletic and ran around barefoot everywhere. And so Briar, the character, I brought Briar in. I introduced her. That's the island, by the way. In this book, I introduced Briar, so she plays a big part in this book. I was watching, I think I might have been watching Harry Potter one night with my 2 boys, and I was looking at Hermione, and I thought, she's such a great character. She's so strong and able and brilliant. And I thought, I need one of those. And in fact, the brothers also have a little girl, little sister in the book called Ada, and I wanted to have, I've only got 2 sons, but I wanted to have a little, I was trying to convince my wife. I said, let's have a little girl. And she said, no. She said, we'll just end up with 3 boys and our life will be a nightmare. So I had to make up my own girl. And I always, if I had a little girl, I was going to make a strong case to my wife for calling her Ada. Well, it's a name that I love. So I called Rebecca, my wife couldn't do anything about it. I called her Ada in the book. So they have a little sister now. But Briar, I was watching Hermione and I just thought, I need a cool character. So Briar was born, her mother was a scientist. She was born in the jungle. She can get a beehive out of a tree 60 feet up in the air. She can escape from a pride of lions. She's just kick-ass. I don't know if I can say that. Sorry, parents, but that's kind of a good way of describing her. And so she's the boys' equal in every way physically. In fact, better than them in a lot of ways, you know. and very smart and clever and talented. And so I'm having a lot of fun writing about her now. I don't want to kind of spoil the story, but she's obviously an integral part of the whole thing. And so I'm having a lot of fun kind of fleshing out her character. I'm writing book 4 now. I'm up to chapter 5 or something. And in fact, so there's going to be 2 more books in the series. As far as I can tell right now, you never know, things might change, but that's my broad plan. And I hope to publish both of them next year.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So when you're writing, do you read bits to your boys, or is it a big surprise?
They beg me to read bits to them, but I refuse. So they get the first reading, but I wait till I've finished the first draft. And then if they're really unhappy with something I've written about them, then we'll have a discussion and change it. But yes, yeah. I won't read it to them until that first draft is done.
Yeah, because the thing I like about the 3 children, Paddy, Flynn and Briar, is that they're all smart, but in a practical way. Yes. They can outthink some of the adults because they've just got, there's so much physically that they can do.
Yeah, well, I always... Actually, we've got quite a few friends that live in the country, and we live in the city, obviously, in Auckland, but you go out to visit them, and the kids are like, got saws and axes, and they're building with hammers and nails, and they're really young, and you just think, how do they get to be so able, How do they get to be so independent and brilliant at doing all this stuff? And they just, I don't know, when you grow up in that situation, you just sort of become that way, I think. Yes. And I love that, and I try, do my best to not be that parent that goes, oh, careful, you'll hurt yourself, because you can always stitch things up. So yeah, I like that. I don't mind broken bones. Death is a bit hard to deal with children, but yeah, broken bones is all right. Cuts are okay. Can always fix them up.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Has anyone got a question? If you come up and talk in the microphone here so everyone can hear the question. Don't be shy. Come on up.
If you want, yeah, good boy, good lad. If anyone else has got one, come on up behind them.
Is it going to be a movie?
Funny you should ask that, actually.
Oh, good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've had 2 people come to me so far wanting to make it into a movie. So I think the answer is yes. In my mind, I think it would make a good movie. Do you think so?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it would. And I don't know, so one of the people that have come to talk to me wants to animate it, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. They want to animate it like How to Train Your Dragon. The other one wants it to be like a live action movie, which is sort of real people, but obviously the dragons would have to be CGI, they call it, made on a computer, but it would actually be real boys running around. And I always thought, so what do you reckon would be better? Animation or the other one? You like animation? Cool, okay, good to know. Good to know. Thanks, good question.
Thank you.
Tell us your name before. Tell us, what's your name?
I'm Ashton.
Ashton. What's your question, Ashton?
Maybe you could make the types of dragons, like water dragons, fire dragons, lightning dragons.
Yeah, that's nice. I like your thinking. Yeah, never really thought of that one. I'll have to give that some thought. I might have a shower when I'm thinking about that one. Thanks, Ashton.
That's a good question.
How did you come up with the idea of falcons delivering notes?
Yeah, it's just like an old school text message, isn't it? So in the book, the boys will write a note, tie it to the falcon's leg. It might just be to their mum saying, Mum, we're going to be home for lunch in half an hour, we're starving. And the falcon will fly off and land on the windowsill, and their mum will untie it and go, oh, the boys are coming home. So yeah, I just really love the idea of doing that. In fact, my friend, he lived in Gisborne, and he lived at the edge of his property, would go straight down the steep sand dune to the sea. And there was a lovely beach, and his dad used to he was a doctor. I don't know, this was crazy. He used to smoke and he used to sunbathe like crazy. He was so brown. It was the worst thing for a doctor. You couldn't believe that a doctor would do it. But anyway, So he used to be down there and he'd have a kite and he'd tie it when there was a nice onshore breeze. He would tie the kite to his toe and it would fly up and it would fly up like that and it would be sort of just a little bit above the bank. And one day we were down there with him. He just loved kites. He loved lying there on the beach looking up at it. And one day he felt something hit his toe and his wife had attached a little message because the string was, she was standing on the top of the bank, the string was going past, she attached a little message saying lunch was ready and she sent it skimming down the rope and it hit him on the toe and he went, what was that? And he opened it, lunch is ready. It was brilliant. But yeah, I just love the idea of being able to do that with your falcon. They did it like, they used pigeons during the war to send messages, so that homing pigeons, so that attach a message to a pigeon's leg, let it go, and it would fly back and deliver this important message. So I love the idea that birds are so clever that they can do that kind of thing. Good question, thanks.
It's just an idea, but there could be like some sort of twist, and they could like find out that like Pitbull is like their grandfather or something.
That was evil. That's like finding out Darth Vader as your father. I like it. Ooh, might have to have another shower on that one. Far out. Believe me, there is a twist coming. In book 4, there is a twist. Yeah. I'm really excited about people finding out about it.
Do we have any more questions? Well, I've got one. James, what did you read when you were growing up?
I liked books that made your heart race. So I loved Danny the Champion of the World, must have been one of my favourites. Fantastic Mr. Fox. I loved the Willard Price novels when I got a little bit older. African Adventure, Volcano Adventure, Undersea Adventure, all of those things. Although I have to admit they're a little weird when you read them now. But actually, and when I got a little bit older than you guys for sure, I must have been maybe 13 or something, I was reading this book called The Power of One, and it was so exciting. It's so exciting. When you get older, you can read it. And I was lying on my bed, and I had the book sitting on my chest like that, and I was reading this crazy exciting bit, and I realised that the book was sort of bouncing on my chest. It was moving on my chest. I went, what's going on? And I put my hand on my heart, and it was pounding in my chest. And I couldn't believe it, that a book could make your heart beat faster. It blew my mind. I thought the only way you get your heart beating faster is by exerting yourself, going for a run or something, or maybe being petrified, scared. But lying in your bed, I thought, how can this happen? And that was actually, it was kind of a turning moment. I thought, I would love to write like that. You know, I'd love to write stories like that. So that's kind of what I hope to have done with these. You know, I love the idea of, actually, I got a brilliant one the other day. A mother told me, she said she went into her son's room. He was about 10 years old. She went into her son's room and she could see, it was 10 o'clock at night, and she could see the light from the iPad coming from underneath the covers. And she thought, you little rat. And she went and she grabbed the covers, she pulled it back, and he was using the light from the iPad to read my book. And that was like the best compliment I could have ever received. And I just thought, so for you to be wanting to read more, to, you know, begging your parents not to turn out the light so you can read another chapter, that's what I want. That's what I really like. So those kind of books, love those action-packed books.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, James. Wonderful to have you here in sunny Nelson. Yeah,
lovely to be here. Thanks to all the organisers and Joe and Kerry for looking after me, and it's really great to be here.
And thank you to our wonderful audience. And if you don't have the full set of books, we do have them over there. And James will be happy to meet with you afterwards.
Sure, yeah, I'll be sitting down here. Come up and have a chat if you like.